Once upon a time, there was a tin man walking along. Yeah, he was related to the Tin Man in the movies who had all the fame and everything, but there was a whole bunch of tin men that they just never made it into the movies. Nobody ever knew about them. Where do you think the Tin Man came from? He had tin relatives, right? And there was a bunch of zinc women out there too. Different types of metals, but they kind of got along. Rarely did they ever marry because you don't mix tin and zinc too much. But this tin guy really liked this zinc girl, for whatever was in his head, but he could never get her attention. I mean, he was walking along the road one day, and he met the king of the Copper Kingdom. Now, this king of the Copper Kingdom, he was pure copper, and he shined, and he was valuable. I mean, tin is useful and everything, and they started to talk, and the king of the Copper Kingdom, he said, well, if you come to my kingdom, I'll share what I have with you, and you can join all my other subjects. It's a better place. We don't have really much corrosion. In fact, if you ally with me, if you become my ally, then I'll give you some copper and mix with your tin, and you become what? Bronze, even more valuable. And the Tin Man thought this was really great. So he went along with the king of the Copper Kingdom, which was just a much more peaceful place. They didn't use copper for weapons and stuff like that, really. It was just a peaceful place, and he got to know the king and all of his other subjects, all the other alloys of copper, and they weren't copper as copper was copper, but they were still an alloy. They were still subject to that, and they had that in them, and the more that they got in them, well, to a certain degree, you can't get out all your tin, right? Well, you try to, but tin is tin, and all the other alloys of the Copper King, But it was a great place, and he shined. He's like, oh, this is really pretty cool. I'm much more valuable now than I was before. And so he was walking along, and he saw this zinc woman again that he really liked. And she goes, what happened to you? She goes, well, I met the king of the Copper Kingdom, and he let me become one of his allies. And see, I'm more valuable now. I'm even stronger now. And she goes, wow, that's pretty neat. He goes, come on, I'll introduce you to the king of the kingdom. The king of the Copper Kingdom. And she said, I don't know. She kind of likes her zinkness, And so she just walked away. Oh, well, so we went back to the Copper Kingdom, and things were great, and things were wonderful, and there's other alloys of the king, and it was great, and there was just very little rust. They were actually even saying someday, there would be no rust at all, which would really be great. And then somebody else introduced this zinc woman. Yeah, some girlfriend of hers who had become an alloy, she's a little brass. And she saw that, and she saw what she could be in the Copper Kingdom, ruled by the king of the Copper Kingdom. And she was like, oh, that's really great. So this woman introduced this other alloy, this other piece of brass introduced this woman to the king, and she agreed to all the rules, and they all lived certain. And so he gave her some of his copper. Now, she wasn't copper like the king was copper, but she became an alloy. She was a little brass, and she shined. And then she ran into the guy who had once been the Tin Man. A Tin Man. And they were in the Copper Kingdom. They were both alloys, and they both shined, and they both had this stuff in common, and they had this great relationship then, and then they had other little alloys. And it was wonderful. And they, well, they didn't live happily ever after. I mean, there's still rust, there's still rain, there's still stuff in this world. But hey, they did live together forever in the Copper Kingdom as alloys of the pure Copper King. That's a parable about who's your king, what kind of an alloy are you, and how men and women can actually get along in the Copper Kingdom. Now, of course, you never become copper is copper, but you certainly are an alloy. And you can't say that you're not copper, because you've been given stuff from the Copper King. You don't go back to being tin. You don't go back to being zinc. You're alloys of the Copper King in the Copper Kingdom, where eventually there will be no rust and people will live happily ever after, an abundant life.